Well, Nitto just did something that should have a lot of competitors worried. Today we're going to talk about the all-new Nitto Terra Grappler G3. It's definitely Nitto's most advanced all-terrain tire to date, which possibly signifies a really interesting change to their corporate strategy. To understand what we're about to talk about, you actually really need to know who this is, and then you need to know why he said this, of all things, about his own tires in front of a very big crowd.
Which means we have a worse ride, shorter life, more expensive.
That is Tomo Mizutami, and he is the CEO and chairman of Nitto, at least until he got promoted this year. Tomo is basically the Mr. Miyagi of the tire industry. He is an expert observer, he does not lose fights, and he has a ton of humility. He took over Nitto on June 30th, 1992. There was only 2 other employees, and Toyo had basically had it with Nitto and pretty much wanted to shut it down. At that point, Tomo had to get approval for any money that he wanted to spend. He actually sent in a request to buy a 3-hole punch, and they declined to pay for his $9.99 hole punch. So he bought it himself. Somehow, by 1995, Tomo had clawed Nitto back into relevance by basically paying attention to the car enthusiast market, the mod market. College kids in the 90s weren't looking for practical tires. They didn't care about long life and smooth driving. They cared about a cool-looking tire. And Tomo wanted to make buying tires fun again. He wanted to make it more fun than paying your power bill. He wanted it to be something that you could look forward to, you could put on your car, and you could stand there when you're walking to the store and look over your shoulder and go, my car looks cool. When he went after the Mercedes and BMW high-end mod market, he had a tire contest, and he didn't invite material scientists and tire engineers to it. He actually invited car designers to it, and he had them do a contest on designing essentially outrageous tires that made vehicles look cool. These tires were not always the most science-based tire. They didn't last the longest on the road. They didn't drive the best on the road. Of course, those designers came up with a really outrageous model of tire that no tire store would order from Nitto until people came in and demanded it. Okay, so why am I telling you this, and what does it have to do with the Terra Grappler G3? Tomo basically did all of us a huge favor. From 2008 to 2018, the tire industry only grew 3%. But Nitto grew 300%. To this day, if you buy a G3, they still have 2 different designs. One on one side for a certain look, and one on another side that's a more aggressive look. They challenged the whole entire rest of the market to say, yes, you can make the nerdiest, most science-based tires on planet Earth, but also you need to remember that we're making tires for humans, and humans care about looks. Every tire designer out there is making more aggressive sidewalls, even if it's an AT tire that's focused on going on the road. They're doing it because they know that sidewalls sell tires right now, and people want an aggressive-looking tire. We have Tomo to thank for that. This G3 is showing an example of Nitto adapting again, differently than they have so far. If you look at Nitto's historic LT lineup, it was a testament to strength, style, and aggression. Not a lot of care was given to traditional tire design principles, things like miles per gallon, or cornering, or even comfort on the road. I've had more than one person tell me the best thing about Nittos is they wear like steel, and the worst thing about Nittos is they drive like steel. Take a look at the trail grapplers, for example. They may not have the most flex on the rocks. There's a lot of things that people could say about them, but if you watch them at King of Hammers, they can take the abuse, they can take the hits, they can take even some rips and tears sometimes, and they just keep on ticking. Well, Nitto has taken what they learned from that, and they've come full circle. We are now inviting the nerds back in the room, and they're designing an AT tire that they understand is going to spend likely 95% of its life on pavement. Let's talk about the G3 and go through everything that they did on this tire so you can understand what it's all about. We're going to start with the tread blocks on the shoulder. You're going to notice a couple things. They did keep the alternating lugs. One's in, one's out. That gives you good traction in the mud. That kind of gives you a scoop on the side to help push you forward. These are still wider voids to also help you in the mud. On an all-terrain tire like this that's supposed to also do good in all different types of weather, usually the center of the tire is going to completely fill with mud, and you're pretty much not going to get a ton of traction here in the mud. So yeah, mud traction comes from the side in the way that they've alternated the lugs. They also, these lugs, it's hard to tell unless you roll the whole tire. They are what they call variable pitch sequence. They're different sizes to make different noise and kind of cancel each other out. Another way that they help with noise is they have this supporting ridge that's in between here, and it goes all along, and that actually does two things. It reinforces these lugs so they don't squish around as much when you're cornering. So this thing's going to drive on the edge of the tire better than you're probably used to. Also, these do help a little tiny bit with noise as well. So it's pretty cool to see those. You can tell when you see something like that on a tire, we've deviated from just only focusing on an off-road focused AT tire to one that is also focused on on-road performance. That reinforced lug, every lug is actually reinforced. If you look down in here, you can also see the ridges on each of these smaller lugs in the middle. That reinforcement of the lugs and the size that you don't really have lugs much smaller than these makes it to where you can run this tire on a big truck. If you get lugs much smaller than this and you don't have that reinforcement, by the time you stick it on a diesel and you're doing some heavy duty towing, it's not going to work very well. So this should still work on a big truck, and that's actually what we're running it on right now. We're running it on a F250 diesel. Okay, so now let's talk about the middle tread. They do a 5-block pattern that repeats itself. This 5-block pattern is kind of interesting. The way that they stuck these, this is a unique looking lug. You don't really see anything like this on most tires out there. It actually keeps wind from going into the tire. The other thing that's interesting is it gives you a very long biting edge here that as you're rolling forward, your car is just going to keep maintaining that edge. So you have biting in all directions with these lugs. You have a lot of biting going, essentially going forward off of these. So it's going to have good traction. They put a lot of notches in here to also help grabbing onto rocks and different things like that. So while I say that this tire is optimized for the person that needs an all-terrain tire that's probably driving 95% on the road, just remember, this is still gonna do just fine off-road. If you want an extreme off-road tire, Nitto makes plenty of other tires that are just focused on off-road, but this one is focused to be good at both. Okay, so let's talk about siping on this tire. This is one of the biggest changes to this tire. On the old G2, they really only had sipes that were made to help during the snow. These are what they call dimple sipes. The old one did not have dimple sipes either, so it has this little dimple here. That kind of actually helps with capturing water and sucking water into the sipe. But when you just have a straight sipe across here with nowhere to evacuate water into a channel, this is going to be fine when you're driving on icy roads. It's going to give you additional edges to help you in your snow traction. There was a lot of sipes similar to that on the old G2. But this one gives us these sipes that actually can evacuate water. So we now have a tire that has more sipes, so it's going to still do better in the snow. This is a 3 Peaks Mountain Snowflake rated tire, but it's also going to do better on wet roads. I don't think the G2 was actually the best tire on wet roads because it didn't have any siping that really applied to that. The one thing you will notice with dimple sipes, if you do drive a lot on gravel roads, you will run into picking up rocks sometimes in these dimples. They more than make up for it by how good of traction they give you in bad weather. So if you're in the Pacific Northwest where there's always water on the road, or you're dealing with a lot of water driving, this is going to be a pretty cool tire. It has more dimple sipes than I've seen really on pretty much just about any tire out there. I expect this tire to do really well in bad weather, and that is why we're putting it on our Ford F-250 that is going to be our off-road logging truck. So it gets lots of miles in the fall to collect firewood in really bad weather conditions. Let's talk about the structure of this tire and the actual compound, the actual rubber that makes up this tire. Nitto has always made really tough tires. In addition to that, if you notice the color of this tire, this is a very black tire, and it's not because it's clean and it's not because I washed it or anything like that to film this. When you see a tire that is this color, and even when it sits out in the sun for several weeks, is not really getting discolored at all, you usually can assume a couple things about it. That usually means it has a high natural rubber content. A high natural rubber is actually white, but they dye it, and they dye it using carbon, and carbon strengthens the rubber a couple different ways. So this likely has a high natural rubber and a high carbon content. Generally, once you've looked at tires as much as I have, you can usually kind of recognize that, honestly, just by how it feels and how it looks. The reason that they would make a tire with high natural rubber and high carbon instead of all the other different types of fillers that they've figured out over the years is that high natural rubber makes these tires very, very chip resistant. So they're very resistant to chips and they're very resistant to tears. So this is very similar to some of the tires that, like the Exo Grappler, where they made it for commercial vehicles that can just drive endlessly on dirt roads and gravel roads, and you're not gonna see chipping out of your tread block. So this, again, should be a very tough tire. This is a new compound. They've never used this one before. So this is the most advanced compound that they've ever made so far. At least that's what they're claiming. And from what I can tell, compounds, they don't tend to really tell you much. That's always kind of like a secret sauce recipe. But just from looking at it, it's definitely high natural rubber. It's gonna be super chip resistant. It should be a pretty tough compound. Now, as far as structure goes, they went ahead and went to a 3-ply sidewall. So you're gonna have a thicker sidewall than the G2 had. But another reason for that is that they did what's called a high turn up. A high turn up means you have your plies going down and they do fold back up. Well, I don't know exactly where any of this stuff terminates, but that means there's a decent portion of this sidewall that is in fact actually more than 3 plies. That's a normal characteristic of most of Nitto's tires. They're very well known for extremely tough sidewalls. Okay, now here's something that's pretty shocking about this tire. Despite the fact that it has really strong sidewalls and everything like that, I weighed 2 of the exact same size tires and the exact same load rating. So I did 275/70R17 tires in a load E rating. This tire weighed 49.67 pounds. The exact same tire in a KO3, BF Goodrich KO3, actually weighed 57.7. So more than 7 pounds heavier, actually. And that's kind of a big change. A lot of Nitto's tires generally run pretty heavy in their class against the competition. So you can see how much the engineers actually worked on this tire to give you a roadworthy tire that could also even potentially get good miles per gallon. Okay, so what do you guys think? If you've run the G2, I'm curious what your impressions are of the G3. Are you considering changing over from something like the Ridge Grappler to something like this that will adapt to more weather driving conditions? Like I said, this is the most advanced tire they've made to date, a all-terrain tire. It's definitely got a little bit of a road focus, but it still has the core Nitto like off-road strength and brawn. It's not gonna fall apart. It's not gonna get punctured. It's an extremely tough tire. So yeah, let me know in the comments. What do you guys think about this tire? Are you interested in trying this tire out? I'm trying it out on my logging truck. We're doing a little bit more of a build on that, so you'll probably see a video on that in the near future. Well, if you like this tire video, you will definitely like our other videos. Check them out here and let us know what you think. We'll see you guys next week.